if Charles Dickens were going to write a tale of 2020, it would open with, "It was the worst of times. It was the worst of times." I think we're all pretty clear on that by now. This has been the craziest year ever, but we may have finally reached peak stupid right here in the middle of 2020. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and they're already shaking their heads on me. We may be in for quite a ride here. So, gentlemen, this is not a lightning round, but I've collected various stories that all came to me just today. We're recording this on Tuesday, and there's just such a flood of stupid that I'm hoping, praying that maybe this is it. Maybe it just can't get any dumber. We'll see. So, Scott, we're going to start with you, I think. New York City's Mayor Bill de Blasio blames coronavirus for city's violence, but his own top cop blames de Blasio for his police reforms. I see a headline like that, and all I can think is, oh, dear God, the coronavirus got guns. We're really screwed now.
You know, I read an interesting story related to that today where they said that it's usually if the number of murders goes up, so does the number of other smaller crimes like, violent attacks and assaults and robberies and things like that. But in this case, actually, the number of murders is surging, but other crimes are not. Or even going down in some cases, which I thought was fascinating. It's just like I'm not going to do anything unless I'm going to do it all the way. It's like I was thinking about robbing that guy's house, but that hardly seems like anything in times like these. I'm going to just go straight to killing someone. I don't understand why that's happening the way it is. And I think that there is a tendency both for politicians to immediately take credit for anything good that happens and for their rivals to blame them immediately for anything bad that happens. I think in both cases, people are mistaken and are motivated by things other than science and data and research. However, I do think that there is something to be said for running a giant city like New York in a way that maintains public safety. And under the best of circumstances, it's highly difficult to do. But if you combine this toxic soup of a pandemic virus with protests where it has been said by public officials that it's okay for people to go out there and essentially, violate their lockdown orders and throw bricks through windows because you're just expressing your righteous indignation, that's a recipe for more crime and more trouble. And I don't think that the Democrat mayors of these big cities ought to be surprised at all.
Well, Scott, maybe the problem is the cities themselves. There was a Guardian story that was published on Monday, I think. I stumbled across it today. There was an author, a female with female personal pronouns, I believe, whose name just slipped out of my brain. I've never heard of her before. But the Guardian did a write-up on her new book, and it's headlined, "Upward Thrusting Buildings Ejaculating into the Sky. Do Cities Have to Be So Sexist?" And the story says, glass ceilings and phallic towers, mean streets and dark alleys, road names and statues of men. From the physical to the metaphorical, the city is filled with reminders of masculine power, and yet we rarely talk of the urban landscape as an active participant in gender inequality. Isn't it time we did that, Scott? Let the healing begin.
Well, I think that it would be brilliant to come up with some other way to have 1 million people live in a square mile of land. But the only thing I could think of is if you're not going to go high, you got to go deep. And so we've learned the lesson from the trolls in the Tolkien stories that you got to be careful if you dig too deep. So I really don't know what to make of somebody who writes this as one of the leading lights in her profession, other than to ask, okay, the same thing I would ask of anybody who has an objection to something, what would be your alternative? How do you wish to see things done? And I'm all for not concentrating large numbers of people in small pieces of land because I think it does nothing but cause trouble. I just don't know that city people are willing to get out of the city. I mean, Green Acres was a long time ago.
Scott,
Steve,
I'm sorry, Bill.
Sorry, just has she never heard of shelving or chest of drawers or other ways to maximize surface area given a certain footprint? That'd be my first objection. And my second objection would be to say, well, if they are symbols of masculine power, then I say since we built them, we can make them any damn shape we want to. And if you don't like them, you go out and build some cities.
And I think
There
it would have
you
been
go.
much harder for the terrorists to hit the twin domes of the World Trade Center. I just
The twin
think.
domes.
So
Scott,
one-story domes.
Scott, you talk about the twin domes, you talk about going deep and releasing the Balrog. You were such an unwitting symptom of toxic masculinity. I don't
know.
even know where to start.
I know, it's untreated.
Untreatable. All right, Bill, let's go to you. And whenever I need my dose of stupid, I just open up Twitter and there it is.
And there it is.
And here it is today. Brittany Marshall, who includes her pronouns in her Twitter bio, lists her occupation as teacher, scholar, social justice change agent. And according to this report, is apparently studying for a PhD at Rutgers, once a fine university. Tweeted, the idea of 2 + 2 = 4 is cultural. And because of Western imperialism / colonialism, we think of it as the only way of knowing. Bill, there are superior ways of knowing, aren't there?
There may be, but I don't want people who believe in those superior ways of knowing building any bridges that I'm traveling on. I don't want them. I don't want them flying airplanes that I happen to be in. I don't want them operating on people I love. I don't want them doing anything that may require the services of an adult. You know, Steve, it's so easy to laugh at this and mock it, and then the next step is to kind of just throw up your arms and say, how can people be so stupid? But really, to understand this, you have to understand that what's driving this is vanity. It's vanity that's driving this. In other words, I am so intellectually sophisticated that I can tell you that 2 + 2 don't = 4. And here are many reasons why they don't. And it's just plain vanity. This is what stupid people do in order to try to sound smart. If you talk to stupid people, and they'll say things like, well, 2 and 2 don't necessarily mean 4. It's a social construct. But you talk to Albert Einstein, you know what he'll say? What's 2 and 2, Al? He'll say, well, it's 4, you moron. What do you think it is? That's enough to count on your fingers. We're not talking about advanced calculus here. And I'm serious about this. If you look at the kind of statements that are made by people like this, you are looking at people who have IQs in the neighborhood of maybe 98 to about 104, and they're trying to look like they've got IQs of 120. But when you get to the IQs of like 130 and guys like Thomas Sowell and stuff like that, they don't have patience for this nonsense. They understand that this kind of thing is just a form of narcissistic virtue signaling. I am so deconstructed that I can deconstruct the simpleness of 2 + 2 = 4. But I challenge her. What about 1 + 1? Why can't you take it another level deeper? Are you not capable of it? Don't you have the intellectual chops? Come on, lady, you can do better than that. This kind of thing is just a form of, it's like a corsage that they wear, you know? It's like a corsage that they wear to their cocktail parties. I've made the case that 2 + 2 don't = 4 unless we know. Wow, you have a very remarkably deep
Steve,
Yes.
when this Rutgers doctor of changeology goes to the Rutgers fruit stand, and the merchant says, okay, here are the 2 red apples that you'd like, and here are the 2 yellow apples that you asked for. Let me ask you, what do you plan to cook with your 7 apples? How?
I'd charge her for 7 apples.
Charge her for 7, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, no. Here, 2 + 2 = 7.
Well, I think as we learned, Bill, from reading George Orwell, sometimes 2 + 2 = 3, sometimes it equals 5. It equals whatever the party requires, and then in the end, we will love Big Brother.
That's exactly right.
And Bill, I posit to you that the following story is exactly the sort of lifelong indoctrination that creates innumerates like Ms. Marshall here. Annie Carney.
She's not an enumerate, by the way. She's an idiot.
Yeah, okay. There we go. The kind of idiot who can get an advanced degree at Rutgers because that's what our universities do now.
But I repeat myself.
Exactly. Annie Carney reported for the New York Times on Sunday, I think, Trump uses Mount Rushmore speech to deliver divisive culture war message, which I thought the divisive culture war message was tearing down all the statues, including of abolitionists and all the rest. But let me read to you the lead of this story. Standing in a packed amphitheater in front of Mount Rushmore for an Independence Day celebration, President Trump delivered a dark and divisive speech on Friday that cast his struggling effort to win a second term as a battle against a new far-left fascism seeking to wipe out the nation's values and history. And this bill was the lead story in the news, not on the op-ed page.
On which
The New York Times
newspaper? Oh,
yeah.
The paper of record. I'm doing a segment on American Pravda this week, Steve, and you know, this has been something that I've noticed from the beginning. We've talked about this before. It's in a weird way. It's related to the fact that since the left said that the Tea Party was racist, and there weren't any racist signs at any Tea Party events, the left manufactured racist signs and then went to Tea Party events posing as Tea Party people to provide the evidence for the belief system that there is no evidence to believe, right? So when you look at this as an example, when you say what kind of person invents evidence to prove something that he believes is true for which there is no evidence, what does that tell you? And what it tells me is this is the exact same thing. And a number of people, probably I think Richard Fernandez is an absolute genius, basically have said that we are not in the midst of a revolution. It's a counter-revolution, that the elitists who were well on their way to locking the country up with the Hillary Clinton win were suddenly overthrown by the people in the middle of the country. And now it is a full-on bring out all the weapons, counterattack on everything. And I think they think that this is going to work. And I just don't think it does. How many times have we say, well, the press has finally destroyed their credibility by dragging this corpse across the line? So the New York Times is a joke now. It's a blog. It's not a very good blog, and they continue to spend their capital and everything they cost. Every time they spend money, credibility money, it costs them more and more, and they buy less and less. The New York Times doesn't sell news. The New York Times sells credibility. That's what the newspaper is for. You can get the news from a raving lunatic on the street. And nowadays, your chance of getting a straight story, a better, more accurate picture of things is with the raving lunatic on the street.
Steve, I actually read that speech, and because I heard such criticism of it, and I thought, what in the world could he have possibly said?
Right.
And I swear, if you take the transcript of that speech and put it under a headline that says, this is the speech Joe Biden says he would have given at Mount Rushmore if he were president, and just printed the exact same speech, it would be praised to the high heavens. He talked about the laudable reasons why we should remember and recognize Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. He talked about equal opportunity. He talked about freedom. He talked about a society where there's no bias because of race or any other characteristics. He talked about basically a country where we are growing together to have a better future as we grow to learn and understand each other and work together. If any Democrat had given that speech, it would have been the greatest speech of the era. But it was because President Trump gave the speech. And I am not a fan of President Trump, as people well know who watch this show. But I evaluate each of his actions on its merits. And when I read that speech, I thought that, the headline should have been, Donald Trump sticks to teleprompter, reading excellent speech by professional speechwriter.
It was a damn fine speech. It really was. I was going to finish with some snarky little comment about, oh, dear God, maybe we haven't reached peak stupid for 2020. We've still got 5 more months to go. And then
we haven't reached peak stupid for July.
That's exactly it. We have a long way to go. So instead, let me finish with a little thought about the speech and why it was so good. typically, I wrote a column about it yesterday for PJ Media, and my angle was President Obama would give these speeches, and when he did it, Independence Day wasn't about white supremacy. It only became about white supremacy about a week ago, because that's what the left currently needs it to be. Sometimes 2 + 2 = 3. Sometimes it equals 5. It is what the party requires it to be. And white nationalism and Independence Day, or whatever the party requires them to be in any given moment. But when Obama or Bush or Reagan would give one of these speeches, and I read a bunch of them yesterday for this column, they would always do the same thing. They would celebrate America's founding and its founding principles, and then at the end give a little gentle push for whatever policy proposal it was they were currently trying to get through Congress. And that's what an Independence Day speech typically is. Some did a little better, others a little more nakedly. Obama's were not that great, but at least he was the last big progressive who at least paid lip service to our founding and to our founding ideals. What Trump did wasn't so much a celebration of our founding and our founding ideals, but a enthusiastic defense of it. And the reason he needed to do that is because our founding and those ideals are being torn down by the left right now in ways I don't think we've ever seen in this country. It's a damn shame he had to do it. I'm really proud of him for doing it as well as he did. And that is your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. I'd like to remind you that content like this needs sponsors like you. So if you aren't a sponsor, click over to BillWhittle.com right now and become one. We need you on board, and we'd love to have your support. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.